Happy holidays and welcome to WBC Faster Together, the LinkedIn Live series of Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, Chief Operating Officer of WBC. And today we are joined by Kip Wright, the CEO of Inspire and WBC Board Director, and Sunny Ackerman, the President of the Americas of S3, a WBC champion and sponsor, to talk about allyship. WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 75 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We live our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, a diverse board of directors, and advisory and leader councils include more than 34% people of color. Every one of our 9 action initiatives has DEI goals for 2025 and 2030. Please check the chat for our 9 action initiatives through which we aim to accelerate change, and join our movement at wbcollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showing the importance of cross-generational collaboration and the allyship of men in the movement. So today we want to talk about allyship and how men and women are working together to change the business landscape. This concept of sponsoring underlies all WBC does, from our 9 action initiatives to how we build our movement. And to that end, we have over 10% of men that are in our movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Kip and Sunny worked together at Manpower from 2014 through 2016. And during this 3-year period, Kip operated as the president of North America, responsible for the US and Canada. And Sunny is one of the 4 business leaders responsible for operations of the entire company. Under Kip's management approach, focusing on empowering and developing his executive team to become future leaders, Sunny flourished. And due to her expertise, eventually gained sole operating responsibility for the US operations of the business. Sunny has gone on to earn top leadership roles, first as president of the America for Frank's Recruitment Group, and is now president of the Americas for S3, a multi-billion publicly traded company based in London. Kip and Sunny have maintained a strong professional relationship, serving as mentors and advisors to each other throughout this time. So welcome, Kip, and welcome, Sunny.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gwen. Appreciate it.
So Sunny, I want to start with you and talk a little bit about your career journey and how Kip's allyship has played a significant role in your advancement.
Yeah, thank you, Gwen, and thank you, WBC and LinkedIn Live. I started in the industry right out of college, in the recruitment industry, and I would say the notion of allyship or the term male allyship was not discussed. Actually, I found this quite interesting when I was Googling something last week. That the allyship is an old noun made new. In the dictionary.com, it was the word of the year in 2021. So wow. It's definitely making a comeback. But Kip was, I would say, one of the very first allies I had, and this was less than a decade ago, which is quite interesting. And I would say male allyship is really about paying attention, and it's something that I've seen Kip do with so many past and current colleagues. So many men and women are not sure how to take action on kind of a practical, really kind of everyday level that feels really authentic and constructive. And, I think it's really about building those interpersonal relationships with those who are very much like us, but also the pure act of getting to know women colleagues better and building personal rapport, and then eventually trust gives them a chance to really, I say from my experience, be seen and heard, but expand, the network and relationships in a meaningful way, but allows me to do the same as well. So I would say Kip early on was somebody that I would see. It was a mentorship type of role, but it quickly moved to more of an advocating in certain circles when I was there or not there in meetings. And I would hear different things outside of meetings that maybe I wasn't participating in. And I would see things firsthand in meetings, which were quite rare for me at that time to kind of see this happen with a male manager at the time. So, there was some very, very, practical things that he did, but they were always very authentic and very real in just his approach in doing it. And it didn't feel like, It's loud activism. It's not. It's really about being curious about, I would say, the lived experiences of women and kind of leaning in a bit. So.
Thank you.
And I love that, because I love how you're saying, he listened, he advocated, really, and that sort of transformation starting his mentorship. Is there like a specific example, Sunny, you'd love to share with us, or maybe even the point when you realize, like, you're both doing this together and you're really realizing how he's doing this, not just in your presence, but sort of pulling you in?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are some examples I've heard from other women in these types of environment. And I've heard this term as well. It's not the term that I didn't come up with it, but it resonated with me. It's the term, and it's some of the behaviors I would say I've seen from Kip, and I would call him an upstander. It's as opposed to being kind of a bystander who sits by and does nothing while something's kind of taking place. And I saw that firsthand, I think, with Kip in a meeting. And if you see a woman, or anyone for that matter, having ideas appropriated by someone else, or being interrupted or talked over, I think calling it out and helping the attention get back to the individual that's making the point. Example was in his meeting years ago, and I'm sure Kip does not remember this, but it was in a very large boardroom. Kip, you'll know what I'd be talking about, at our headquarters. And I was presenting at the time, and I was a very young executive in the company at the time, and one of the only females in the room. And I was making a point around a particular topic that we were talking about. It was around change and change management in our operating model. And I noticed that, I was speaking around it and the point was made. And then one of my happened to be male colleagues brought the point back around and kind of referenced it. And Kip said, "Great idea, I agree." And this is exactly what Sunny was telling us just a few minutes ago, right, John, at the time. And it kind of stopped my other colleague in his kind of footsteps. He's like, "Well, yeah, I think I was just referencing the point that we were speaking about. But Kip, you don't remember, you kind of brought it back around to me because it's something that I made earlier on in the conversation, but it was just kind of blown over a little bit." So I really appreciated that. I think also you'll say things like, I've been on conference calls with you, again, this is years ago, where you'll catch people and say, "Hang on a second, let so-and-so finish her thought," or "let so-and-so finish his thought." So it's not always about just women, but it's, I think those kinds of things in those types of sessions are really important. Specifically right now, when we're working in a hybrid environment, it's something I've caught myself doing with my female colleagues when I'm in, in a calls with, different groups of people, is making sure that I'm reaching out, having people have their voice, but also letting people finish their thoughts and calling people out when they haven't been able to do that. So I think that's a really important piece too. Very practical advice.
And you're right, it's really hard in this kind of hybrid environment, right, to be able to do that. So being very cognizant. Kip, as you hear this, like, what are your thoughts? And maybe too, at a point when you realized, what you were doing deliberately versus kind of maybe what you were naturally doing. What are your thoughts when you hear somebody talk about her experience?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think it's important to call the following out, which is Sunny has achieved what she's achieved on her own merits and capabilities. And, second, she's a great example of someone who raised her hand and expressed her interest and willingness to be considered for higher roles. And so I think, the key for any individual to be successful, regardless of gender, is that willingness and interest and letting it be known. I think the challenge that many face, like Sunny, and in the context of this discussion, women in business, is there often is this kind of feeling of, I've heard it used, the whole imposter syndrome, right? Like, maybe I'm not supposed to be here. Maybe I shouldn't be considered for that. And so, activities, even the most little ones, I'm shocked and pleasantly shocked, so to speak, Sunny, to hear the examples of even the littlest of things that others may not see, set examples or perhaps create boundaries or restrictions for individuals and often for women in business, not knowing that, that's what feeds them into maybe not speaking up as much or not sharing the ideas. I look at a lot of these things. Obviously, I'm incredibly proud, to be an ally for her and for so many other individuals like Sunny. But I look at things through a bit of a different context, which is, in leadership, one of the most important things for you to have is to have diversity of thought and diversity of input. And that diversity needs to come from so many different ways, from different backgrounds, from different genders, from different ethnic beliefs. When you do that, you create a much more powerful organization, right? And so if you don't promote that, and you let that even passively be stifled, you don't end up with a better outcome. And so, look, I'm extremely proud to be professionally associated with Sunny. She has done some amazing things. Now even runs a bigger organization than me, which is fantastic. But that's, that's what happens when you give individuals a chance and you support them and you promote them.
So I want to ask you both something. We talked about before this call, we were talking about allyship, and Sunny, you brought it up, the word sort of come back. It's a noun, is it a verb? But what, and maybe how has that evolved, I think, for both of you and your relationship, right? So this, from mentorship to sponsorship to professional colleagues, because sometimes people think it's the opposite. Has it evolved, and what does that term mean, I think, now? What does that look like? I don't know, Kip, if you want to start, or Sunny, you were nodding, maybe you go ahead and start.
Yeah, I'll be happy to just share. I mean, I would say early on, again, it was more of a, employee to manager type of relationship, and then became a bit of a mentorship sponsorship. I would, now that I'm, further on in my career, and Kip and I are in different organizations, it's really become a friendship. It's truly a friendship, and it's a friendship also that has no kind of, boundaries in terms of, we'll call each other, I'll text you or have an issue. Lots of times it could be something I'm dealing with personally. Lots of times it's things professionally, and he'll also call me now and ask for advice on different topics too, which is quite fascinating. I think specifically with things that he's working with in his organization. So it's truly become a friendship, a very, very candid, transparent, authentic friendship, but also one that we're here to help each other through different types of situations or things that we're working through in our current environment. So it's something it's really evolved and matured, but it's something I greatly appreciate.
Yeah, and I'll echo that, because if you were to ask me the question, how did I benefit personally and professionally? Well, first of all, the organization benefited because they got a fantastic leader that achieved some amazing things, that had the same mindset in terms of developing her leadership below her, and then the individuals below them, being an advocate for each individual to make sure that the environment was the right environment. So professionally, when you're running an organization and you have leaders that think that way, you accrue benefits for the whole organization. But personally, as Sunny mentioned, I gained an incredible friend and a peer, and I think this is an important piece. A peer that I lean on for advice, for guidance, and for counsel. And I mean, literally just yesterday, I was reaching out to her and saying, okay, I got this issue. How are you guys addressing it? How are you thinking about it? How powerful is that? How powerful is that to create a network of peers that you can lean on to be guidance, to be counsel, to obviously to call you and say, I've got similar questions or different questions, well, how you approach this, but to have it be a two-way street. I think that becomes really, really important.
So I want to ask each of you, and Kip, I want to start with you, that, how can men or people be better allies to each other? Like, what are the things we can do to be better allies? Because as we've talked about, it's men being allies to women, but it's, Sunny, you brought it up too, it's women being allies to all women, or all people at the table for that diverse voices. But what are some of the things individuals can do, Kip, to be better allies?
Yeah, and I'm going to start that with a little bit more of a grand statement, if you will. I think doing the right thing accrues all sorts of benefits, right? And I think if we can step back and think of ourselves in the context of a much, a greater purpose, so to speak, doing the right thing becomes really important. And I think secondly, I believe that if we are going to make a change in this world, it's going to take each one of us doing maybe just one thing right again and again. So the old one in a row concept, to actually affect that change, and then the power of that gets multiplied across so many other things. I think that the right answer is to create an environment at work, personally, where you're open to ideas and new concepts, where you consciously look for and recognize the sources of talent, the sources of information, the sources of expertise and capability, if you will. And you actively advocate to make sure that those sources are present, right?
Yep.
So whether it's the little things like making sure you go back and accrue credit to individuals when they make a point so that they're emboldened to make that same or similar points over and over again, or you know, I'll find myself doing this in a meeting. I'll consciously look around, and if I see someone that's not engaged, pull them in. And why do I do that? Because first of all, the team's going to benefit from that engagement. The individual is going to feel part of the team. And frankly, the outcome is going to become even more powerful. So whether it's little things like that, or even grander things like, you know, looking at your organization, thinking through, like taking a step back and look at it from your perspective, but what about from the perspective of a female, or perhaps maybe from, you know, a person of color, or a different perspective, like how are we viewed? How is the organization viewed? Is there a level of acceptance? Is there a level of engagement? Is there any intentionality in terms of making sure that the activities and actions we do are equitable? And again, difference between the term equal and equitable, right? Which is, you know, creating some sense of opportunity for equality. And, you know, you'll find that talent, that capability will rise to the top.
It'll rise. Sunny, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think this is why, you know, these kind of programs are needed, or, you know, male ally engagement is so essential. I mean, it's a fact, men still make up most of the top table, and therefore really are in a position of power when it comes to bringing about change. And so it's really important to acknowledge that I would say true empathy takes work, but self-congratulatory, shallow or short-sighted kind of initiatives can further undermine sometimes marginalized groups. So I think leaders like Kip, and I think I pride myself also in doing some of the work that recognize kind of diversity, equity, inclusion involves kind of ongoing work, and really work that must be sustained over time, and that we all have work to do to support marginalized groups. So it involves action, and you can't just simply display your ally badge and assume the work's done. It's an ongoing thing that I think we have to do. But as I said earlier, I think it's paying attention and being cognizant of certain things happening, like Kip said, whether it be small gestures that he probably didn't even realize he did, or, you know, bigger gestures organizations can do, like looking at mentorship and sponsorship programs, training, top-down organizational reviews, policies, you know, inclusive policies, inclusive training. There's a lot that organizations can do around this. And there's a lot of phenomenal content available to individuals and organizations out in the marketplace today that you don't have to develop it yourself. There's a lot of really great things that are available to a lot of different organizations to be able to look at this. But I think that piece around, you know, really thinking about the action that you're taking and paying attention. So
I want to pick up on that piece too, and I'll start with you, Kip. I want to pick up because we like to sort of close these out of what can companies do, what can organizations do. So, and Sunny, you started that. Kip, what can companies and organizations do to ensure that, you know, whether that's have an allyship program, ensure that they can create a workforce or a company culture where allyship is promoted and being used to build out?
Yeah. So, and I hope before we close out, you make reference to some of the amazing, you know, material and toolkits and resources that we have at WBC, because you don't need to recreate the wheel, right? There's some fantastic work out there, and that's exactly why WBC exists. First of all, it starts at the top. You've got to have leadership with a willingness to look at things, and to look at things through a much more purposeful lens. You know, you've noticed I'm not trying to promote this from an advocacy perspective, because I feel like it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for business. It's the right thing to do for your employees. It's the right thing to do for your clients. You know, those are all important elements that if you're thinking more purposefully and becoming much more inclusive in how you approach things, your output is better, and your results improve in that respect. So I think that's important. I think, look, I do think that when you're dealing with some of these things, being a bit more intentional with executives that show promise. I'm big on succession plans. I'm big on looking at individuals and development of our leaders, with something we do within our organization. I believe that, you know, employee resource groups are very helpful, because sometimes it's good just to know and to be associated with an affinity group that understands your challenges, and you can express that and create some dialogue up the chain for management. So those are examples of a couple of things. And as we close out, I mean, the other thing that we're trying to do, Sunny and I happen to be in an industry within staffing where it's disproportionately more women. I think it's like 67% of the industry is women. But when you move into top management P&L responsibility, that shifts radically. You know, how are we going to change that? And one of the things we've been able to do with the help of the WBC is a survey and looking at our industry. We've just done our second survey. We're about to publish a dashboard, which everyone will, speaking of resources, will soon get access to. You know, those kinds of that kind of insight help you understand and benchmark where you are as an individual and an organization against where you're trying to go. So I use that as one last example.
Perfect. Sunny, last thoughts on what companies and organizations can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things around the inclusive policies around, you know, and training, I think is really important. We started a program within our organization called Identify Plus, and it's really a mentorship sponsorship program. So I think it's really looking at things that organizations can do internally, but also I just think it, you know, like Kip said, sometimes it's just, you know, again, recognizing kind of sometimes the, you know, looking for patterns, you know, taking the temperature of the room, thinking about, you know, what are some of the things that organizations can do that are kind of practical, or leaders and organizations can do. And Kip's point around it does start at the top. It absolutely does. And that's, you know, anything around leadership and individuals in positions of leadership need to role model that behavior as well. It's really, really important.
Intentionality and starting at the top. Perfect. Well, thank you, Kip and Sunny, for your insights today. And unfortunately, that is all we have time for. This is our last LinkedIn Live for 2022, but we will be back in January 2023, starting January 5th, to start off our amazing year driving action to impact. And don't forget to join us, as we talked about, even in this, we are truly faster together, working through intention, working as allies with each other. Kip mentioned resources, so we invite you to wbcollaborative.org to learn more about our initiatives designed to increase women in the C-suite and the boardroom, to address the underrepresentation of women in areas like access to capital, and to advance a pipeline of women leaders that are going to bring gender and pay parity, diversity, equity, inclusion to the business landscape. And it's not just women leaders, but it's women and men leaders. And as we break for the holidays, have a wonderful holiday. Visit our website, look at our newsletter to keep up to date on our progress, and join us, the Movement for Gender Parity in Business, and follow us on social media at WB Collaborative on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Happy holidays. And Kip, Sunny, thank you so much. And it's so great to have you as champions, colleagues, advisors, and board members with WBC.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen.